Happy Thursday to you. I want to get into the names of God, but I just want to take a moment to tell you I woke up with clarity and certainty this morning because everything in life, there is definitely more knowledge now that we're on 2 days after the election. You want to know what I woke up and realized this morning? Jesus isn't voted off the throne. God is still in control, and we're going to continue on with our mission because in 3 years, we're going to go through this again. But the one constant is God. And that's one thing that hit me this morning as I woke up, as I'm doing these names and the study of who God is. God continues to be constant in a world that is inconsistent. God is consistent. So I hope that that blesses you. I hope that brings a great reminder to you this morning as we finish the final day of the study of the names of God. Really quick, let's remind ourselves that a name is a person's greatest connection to their identity, it's to their individuality. And it really tells us who they are. It helps us to know what they do and how they handle themselves, especially when it comes to God. Remember, in the Hebrew Bible, there are different names of God, but it's translated in the English Bible as Lord, Lord, or Lord. Big L, big O, big R, big D. Big L, then lowercase ord, and then uppercase L, and then the small caps ord. Each of those means something different, and that's what we've been looking at the last 2 weeks. We looked at God as the all powerful one that we call Elohim. We looked at God as the self existent one, I am Jehovah. We also looked at the I am Yahweh, God's personal name that the Jewish people wouldn't have used, so they made up Jehovah. I don't want to say made up. They wanted to be able to create a name of Jehovah's because they didn't want to profane or disrespect the personal name of God. So they went from Yahweh to Jehovah. And then we also looked at the name Adonai, which means the great Lord. And then this week we looked at different names of God, with Jehovah being I am. So we looked at Jehovah Salom, which means I am peace, Jehovah Nisi, which means I am victor, or I am victory, or I am your victor. And then yesterday we looked at Jehovah Shammah, which means the Lord is there and that we are not alone. And so today we want to look at the final name of God. This name of God, it brings back good memories. And I want to go into a little bit of a story with a purpose. I went to Lancaster Bible College, and it's there I met Holly, and we got married. And I can remember the day that we got married. I created a T-shirt. I took a white T-shirt, and when I was at LBC at that time, they had a dress code of khakis and a polo. And I'm a little bit of a rebel at heart, so I didn't want to wear the khakis and the polo. So I ended up creating a T-shirt, a white T-shirt, got a Sharpie, and on the front of it, I put Jehovah Jireh. And on the back, I wrote, God provided a wife. And I was able to, quote, get away with not wearing a polo because I had a biblical name of God and was celebrating a great occasion in my life. And so it's a great reminder today as I do this study of Jehovah Jireh, Lord provides, God provides. All right, so let's go into this. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 22. I didn't give you your warning, so I'm going to launch right into Genesis 22. If you have a Bible, it's probably entitled something along the lines of Abraham's faith is tested. You see, Abraham was a man of God, and he followed God and he obeyed God, and God wanted to test Abraham's faith. And God told Abraham, I want you to take your son, your only son, your firstborn son, the son of promise that God promised to Abraham, and I want you to take him up this mountain, and I want you to sacrifice him to me. Your one and only son. And Abraham is just saying this doesn't make sense. It's very difficult for Abraham to understand. And friends, many times in our life, God asks us to do things that don't make sense. Now, not don't take this to the extreme of saying God told me to sacrifice my child. That's not what the point of this text is. You see, God took and promised Abraham something, and many times we want to walk with God when it's easy, when life is going our way and the prayer requests are being answered left and right. And oftentimes it's when we go through the difficult times when God asks us difficulties to walk through difficult times that our faith is tested and our faith is strengthened. And then we're going to see Jehovah Jireh, the Lord providing. So Abraham had a decision to make. He heard what God wanted him to do. And Abraham had this decision. Is Abraham going to obey God in the difficulties or just when it's easy? And that's my question to you. Are you going to obey God when things are going your way or just when it's difficult as well? So Abraham, he took Isaac and he took the preparations. Actually, Isaac carried all the wood, scripture says, to go up to the mountain. And Isaac is walking up knowing that there's a sacrifice. And he turns to Abraham. He says, Dad, where's the sacrifice? And Abraham turns to Isaac and said, God will provide the lamb in verse 8. God wanted to see if Abraham was willing to follow through on the commands of God. Was Abraham willing to live in obedience? And many times God brings trials into our life and difficulties into our life to see if we will continue to live in obedience to God, if we will continue to trust in the provisions of God, that we will continue to trust in the plans of God, even when they don't go our way. So the rest of the chapter tells us that they prepared the altar, they prepared the sacrifice. Isaac is on the altar. Abraham is ready to plunge the knife through Isaac's chest. And all of a sudden, God spoke from heaven and said, Stop, Abraham. And Abraham looked over into the thicket, into the bush, and he saw that there was a sacrifice there. And it was there that Abraham said, Jehovah Jireh. God has provided a sacrifice for me. And that is that is the gospel. That is what we study in the Bible, that God has provided a sacrifice. It wasn't by the boy named Isaac, it was by the man named Jesus Christ. And once we understand the sacrifice that God gave and that Jesus went to and threw on the cross, our response should be thankfulness. Our response should be worship. Our response should be a desire to follow God after all that he has done, because Jehovah Jireh, the Lord, provided. In a time of need, God provided. In this story, in this biblical truth, it was God provided a sacrifice. Your homework today, I usually don't assign homework, but it'd be neat for you to do. Sit down for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and just write down how God has provided food, clothing, shelter, relationships, husbands, wives, children, a career, a retirement, a boat. Just think about all the things that God has provided. We get to live in one of the greatest nations in the history of the world, where we get freedom, so many freedoms that people don't enjoy. That is a provision of God. So the question that I would like for you to answer throughout the day and the days to come is, how has God provided for you? The second question is, are you trusting in God's greatest provision, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, so that you can live in response and worship for how God has provided for you? If you need help, if you want to reach out, if you want to talk, let me know, and I would be glad to enter a discussion. I hope that you have a great Thursday, and I will see you either for church on Sunday on our Facebook page around 11:10, or I will see you back here Monday morning for a new study through our devotion times. Have a great couple days.